Well, good morning, everyone. And as we take a moment to appreciate not only this morning, but also our connection to one another, I invite us to turn to the consciousness of prayer. If you're comfortable doing so, please close your outer eyes or perhaps soften your gaze in order to focus within. To simply set aside the outer world, knowing that it can be picked up later, but it doesn't have to occupy this moment in time. Sweet friend God, sweet precious Spirit, we are so grateful to connect across the inches and across the miles. For we know that there truly is no place where God is not. And in that honest, sincere presence of total connection, we find ourselves gifted by the wisdom and the will that flows through each of us. We go within to simply open our hearts to receive whatever message might be there at this moment, to simply honor that message and to take it forward, whether inspired by one of the beautiful songs, the daily word, or perhaps something later in this morning. We open our hearts to receive, knowing that God is truly working through us. Let's just take a moment to go within and listen to what is ours to hear right now. It may be a word, it may be a picture with all kinds of colors. It may be a favorite fragrance. It may be the laughter of a child or the sound of pure silence. Whatever our heart of hearts has gifted us this morning is ours to follow, to appreciate, and to take forward. So with an attitude of pure gratitude, absolute thankfulness and joy, we say, and so it is, and amen. And in this moment, we allow ourselves to remember to breathe, because it is in breathing that we nurture every cell of our body, and we begin to move into this time in worship a little more deeply. But first, I have a little gift for you. This picture, if you can see the words on the screen, you'll probably get it a little better, but you may not be able to. It says you've gone incognito. So this is my cat sitting on my laptop. Now, I don't know how many of you have cats, have ever had cats, but I have a theory. Cats are alien beings who have come to us from another planet so that they can train humans to be their slaves. I don't know about y'all, but this little guy has definitely done so. As a matter of fact, I think when he went incognito, he was calling the mothership just to report on his mama. Oh, and by the way, his name is Chewbacca. So today we're going to talk about breathing tenderness into our world. The idea of breathing tenderness into the world is to simply say yes whenever we're called to do something, to listen to that still small voice and do what is ours to do in the moment. So I've got a little bit of a story that I'd like to share with you. I don't know how many folks are familiar with Father Gregory Boyle. He's out of East LA. I see a head nod from Mary Ann, so this is good. He's an amazing man, and he's done a lot of work with gang reduction and recidivism reduction, both in prisons and in gangs. He's come to a place in his life where he's been doing this for 35 years, and he has been amazing contributor to the consciousness of change in the East LA. In his youth, as a brand new priest, a Jesuit priest, if that means anything to folks who have studied Catholicism, he went south of the border for total immersion in the Spanish language. And he's pretty fluent in it, which is very helpful because East LA, most people habla español, muy bien, ¿verdad? So what they do is they allow, it allowed him rather to be able to connect with the people in the community. He asked before he came back to the States for the poorest parish in the LA area, and he was given Dolores. So if you know Spanish, you know that Dolores means pain and sorrow. So he went into a parish that was named this way with an understanding that he had work to do. What he did initially, besides masses and blessings and baptisms and funeral masses, he listened. He began to ask questions of the women who were attending services, and he listened to their answers. The one thing that he realized that was necessary was that they felt the greatest gift that could be given to the community was jobs for the young men and women, but specifically the young men. These were the ones who were joining the gangs. Now, the church was located at that time and still is located there between two projects, two huge apartment buildings that were home to a number of gangs that were rival. Clearly, there was not a lot of unity in that consciousness with the gangs that were in that area. Now, Father Greg has done hundreds of funeral masses since he has moved to the area. However, he has also reduced recidivism to an incredible level. The standard recidivism rate, that's the return to prison after someone has been incarcerated the first time, they go back, their standard rate is 70%. The folks who go through the homeboy industries, and I'll give you more on that in a minute, but they have an 18-month re-entry program. The folks who go through that program, there is only a 30% recidivism rate. He has cut it by more than half. So when we look at that contribution to consciousness, what's happened? He has practiced incredible amounts of tenderness. He has listened. He has shown up. He has done what we use as our fifth principle, knowing these things. God is, I am. I think, I pray, and then, of course, I act. Knowing these things is not enough. We must live them with our fifth principle. He has lived it for more than 35 years. He started in a very small space, using what you see in front of you as one of Unity's logos. In Unity, we practice inclusivity, we practice diversity, we practice equity, and we practice acceptance. And I added the 4 words at the bottom, which is also part of what he teaches: know them, just us. When I begin to realize, know them, there's only one of us here, then I began to understand and realize that mine is to go to the margins to share what I can. I almost felt tears coming out of my eyes when we sang Sanctuary a few minutes ago, because I just taught that to a group of women I work with here in Temple who have been trafficked and who are now putting their lives back together. And to hear them sing, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, just opened my heart to incredible levels. Father Greg quotes this beautiful woman, Mother Teresa, with this particular message. The problem with the world is that we've just forgotten we belong to one another. When we remember we belong to one another, then it's possible to step up and do what we can, not for our ego satisfaction, but to do it humbly with an open heart, to remember this too is mine. And what you see before you are 3 of the books that Greg Boyle, his young folks call him G, 3 books that he's written. The first one, Tattoos on the Heart, did an incredible introduction on how to begin to show up, to pay attention, and to respond in love in this world. That happens to be my personal mission statement. I show up, I pay attention, I respond in love. The subtitle is The Boundless Power of Compassion. The second one of the three, Barking to the Choir, is an amalgam of barking up the wrong tree and preaching to the choir. And that particular phrase was given to Father Greg by one of the young men whom he calls his homies. He literally thought that was going to be a wonderful title. And of course, the subtitle is The Power of Radical Kinship. And the third one, The Whole Language, The Power of Extravagant Tenderness, is another way of saying when we're speaking openly, using all of our words, and we're listening with both of our ears, we're truly communicating with our hearts. The artwork on the second two, The Whole Language and Barking to the Choir, was done by a young man named Fabio. And his story is quite simply that he came out of prison. He went to Homeboy to get a little bit of training to find out what he needed to do. And he found out his passion was art. And he began to not only work with art in his own life, his own healing, he decided to go to school, to go back to school, and to get a degree in art therapy. So what he does now is he works with the folks who are in the 18-month program to help them to utilize art therapy for their own lives so they can begin to move through some issues. Many of us know that sometimes it's hard for the words to come out, but if we can draw it on paper, perhaps we can begin to express ourselves in a way that we can start that healing process. So Fabio has found that not only does he get to be an art therapist, he opened an art gallery in East LA. So he went from prison to an artist with his own art gallery. And this is just one of the many stories. Homeboy Industries currently has a huge facility in the Chinatown area, and it looks like this. The original facility was not too far. It was actually, I think, across the street from Dolores Mission. So Greg was in his office when a Hollywood producer came to him and said, "This is what I would like to do. I would like to film you. You're doing great work. We need to get this out there. We need to make a documentary." And Greg thought about it a minute and he said, "That's going to cost some money." And he said, "Well, do you have something else you'd like us to do?" And he says, "Yes, would you buy that bakery for us across the street?" And he did. And that's when they began to really thrive. Initially, the idea was to put folks out there and train them on things like plumbing. But unfortunately, not many people were very keen on having convicted felons come in their homes. So that didn't go over as well as it might have. So they created a space where people could come to them. Homegirl Cafe, there's also a silk screening factory. There's a huge bakery where people who are from different gangs work side by side to make bread, to do something as profoundly simple as baking together, without any disruption, any worry, any sense of discord. They're literally working together as a family. And the jobs that come out of this, not only does the 18-month program provide them with an opportunity for jobs within Homeboy, it also provides them with job interview skills, ways in which they can attend job markets, go to places where there are job fairs, create spaces where they can be hired. You see, Gregory Boyle realized that a closed container wasn't going to work. He became familiar with all of the local agencies, social services, the law enforcement agencies, the justice agencies, the civic agencies, so that he could begin to connect the pieces and allow the reentry process to occur for these men and women. Most of them are men, but there are some women. So in addition to the job training and the youth reentry, he has a program that caters to young people between the ages of 14 and 24, people who have been disenfranchised, who have been given a less than deck on dealing, or a less than hand on dealing, if you will, in life. And he develops that workforce for them. Currently, Homeboy Industries is the largest gang rehabilitation and reentry program in the world. So why am I spending all this time telling you about what Homeboy does? Because the theme today is tenderness. And what Gregory Boyle taught was that once we are reached by tenderness, we become tenderness. When we become tenderness, we are literally following the example of our master teacher, that elder brother, that beautiful, wonderful once human being who walked this earth in the first century. Tenderness means that I am willing to be vulnerable and to let down any barriers, any guard, anything that says I am better than or even less than, because I am who I am meant to be right here and right now. And I love that idea. To be tender is to treat ourselves and everyone else with that beautiful gift we call mercy. And to do so means that I'm stepping out of my comfort zone of feeling like I have to be safe and protected. Last month, I talked about the idea of courage. Courage means being able to, in my universe, being able to step out of that comfort zone and to be able to be comfortable in a way that says yes to life, that says yes to a new adventure. I had a new adventure last week when I smelled a gas leak in my alley, called the gas company, and they came and locked out my meter because it was leaking. The new adventure was, well, I don't need to cook with my stove this week. I'll wait until the plumber comes, and they're going to be here tomorrow. But it's a little adventure. I call it a first world problem. So when we look at tenderness, I also got a gift of mercy from the gas company. I didn't know this. No one had sent a memo, but out of the kindness of his heart, he told me that the gas company is in the process of replacing all of the lines in the area. And the part from my meter in the back alley to the house no longer exists. Therefore, the need for repair will no longer exist in a couple of weeks. That, to me, is not just mercy, it's also the grace of God entering the picture. So again, a first world opportunity to remember. This beautiful young man is named Mario. And at first sight, some people might see the artwork on his face and neck and might have an opinion. But when I look at this young man, I see nothing but tenderness. He works as a barista in Homegirl Cafe. That's why he's got the Homegirl t-shirt on. And he literally is one of the first people that visitors to Homegirl will see. They'll see that this young man is there earning a paycheck to support his family, doing a job that he enjoys. And he's there to greet and to serve. And he will tell you that. That's his job, and that's what he does very well. So when we find ourselves thinking that this particular person looks a particular way, then what is my filter? What is it that I'm using to see that person? And what is it that I'm using to block seeing the truth of that person? How am I allowing myself to limit my experience of this beautiful human being? Another view of the inside of the cafe, and you can see it's a sweet place. It only takes up part of that huge building I showed you a moment ago. Yet through these doors, people like Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda and Jim Carrey, Jill Biden, there's so many people who have literally visited this space because they believe in what Father Greg is doing. They believe that it makes sense. One of his slogans is jobs, not jails. And the idea being that we can, in fact, see the light, see the Christ within each person, and begin to let them live up to the truth of who they are. Every time I label another person as X and someone else labels them as X and someone else labels them as X, the energy going toward that person is diminuting their potential. It's diminishing rather their potential and reducing their ability to be the person they are. We can help them. Last month, I talked about coaching and empowering and lifting folks out of that space of limitation and lack in a way that allows us to see them in their own beautiful, wonderful glory. Not only has Homeboy Industries received awards from the local area and begun to expand their reach in the community. They have a mail order business. They have the silk screening I talked about, all kinds of different things that they do. In addition to all of that, they have expanded their cafe into LAX. Anyone ever been to the Los Angeles International Airport? It's a huge place. And this much counter space in LAX speaks volumes because we're looking at an opportunity for Homeboy to truly grow and do the work that they were called to do. A few months ago, Father Greg received one of the greatest offers, one of the greatest awards offered to humans. And that was when he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And this was just before our president fastened the medal around Father Greg's collar. And what I love about the idea is that I see a man who's just showing up in his own humility, doing what he does to the best of his ability, and accepting these gifts that are outward manifestations of walking his talk, outward manifestations of showing up, paying attention, and responding in love. So when we look at the scripture that I believe supports this entire process, I turn to Luke chapter 4, verses 16 through 21. Now, because Mary never called him Jesus, his mama called him Yeshua, I tend to refer to him in that way. Yeshua went to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because Abba has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, and has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Then he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began by saying to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Now, if you remember the rest of the story, you'll get the subtext of "you can't go home again." But more than that, in this particular reading, he is fulfilling the law. Yeshua is stating these things because it was part of his path toward being called as Messiah, the anointed one. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because I've been anointed to proclaim the good news of the poor. When we have been given the gift to say yes to whatever is ours to do, whatever is in our ability to do, then it's a wonderful opportunity to embrace our humanity to the fullest and step into that role. Going back to Mother Teresa, one of my favorite quotes is, "I am the hands and feet of God." And when I look at it from those eyes, what I see is that being the hands and feet of God means that I can step into this role to serve. I love the work that I do in this community, whether it's serving with young men who are working off their probation, or whether it is working with the women who have just started to get their feet on the ground from having lived a life of oppression in many ways, or whether it's to work with homeless children. It's a gift to have the ability and the opportunity to reach out in simple ways. Earlier, we sang a beautiful song that was originally written by Julian of Norwich. All shall be well, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. She was an anchoress during the bubonic plague. And an anchoress in the Catholic Church is someone who literally lived in a very small enclosure at the base of the church and received through an outer portal the requests for prayers from passersby, as well as prayers from those on the inside. Held the consciousness, if you will, kind of like our modern day silent unity. Held the consciousness, prayerful consciousness, for all to whom she ministered. Now, she was not only in the middle of the bubonic plague, she was in the midst of the 100 Years' War. She was dealing with all kinds of issues in that time period. Yet she chose to write what she called the Showings, a beautiful bit of prose that spoke to the idea that God is in all things. And she demonstrated that through her work. So that song, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, was part of what she wrote in the Showings. I love the idea that we have that gorgeous modern day version of what she was able to share in her own lifetime, to hold that consciousness and to live it the best way she was able in the time in which she lived. And when I return to this piece of scripture that's on the screen, what I'd notice is when we look at Isaiah 61:1, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor and sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight to the blind, and to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. When I find myself remembering that, it helps me to align what I'm doing with what needs to be done in order to literally feed my soul. So I have a question. You might call it your home play. Homework sort of sends people into another category, but home play. How might I breathe tenderness into our world today? It might be to hug that sweet little boy I saw at the beginning just before we started. It might be to let the smile of a friend come into your heart, to accept it fully. It might be to do an anonymous good deed. I love the idea, for example, of May baskets, where you go hang a little basket of posies on people's doorknobs on May 1st. You don't have to know who put it there, but you just know that somebody cared enough about you to do it. How might I breathe tenderness into our world today? So let's just take a moment to breathe into that question. And whatever comes up, we know that it was put there because we are open to listen to the presence and power of Spirit. What a gift that is. And as we do so, I'll just remind you of 3 subtitles of those books. The power of boundless compassion could be a way to breathe tenderness. The power of extravagant tenderness. The power of radical kinship. Those 3 powers are those that we might even add to strength, understanding, power, enthusiasm, release, and will, order, love, faith, wisdom, imagination, and life. Our own 12. We might choose to say yes to these as an augmentation of the 12 powers of unity as we move through our life in a way that says yes to honoring precious humanity. And so it is. Peace be still, my friends.